Welcome to another edition of Dad's Divorce Live. I'm Sean Garrison, your host and editor of DadsDivorce.com. Today we are joined by Dr. Jennifer Kane, who is a sociologist at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Jennifer recently helped conduct a study that looked at the non-monetary contributions provided by non-custodial fathers. Thank you for joining us today, Jennifer.
Sure, thanks for having me.
To start with, can you tell us about these interviews that you conducted with non-custodial dads and fathers? Who were the fathers that you talked to? What were their backgrounds? And what kind of questions, I guess, did you sort of ask in these interviews?
Sure. So we interviewed more than 300 non-custodial fathers. We focused on 3 U.S. cities, Austin, Texas, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Charleston, South Carolina. And all of the fathers in our study were low income, which we defined as having a monthly income from all sources that had to be less than the poverty line for a family of 4 in the year that they were interviewed. And by and large, the fathers in our study were very poor. So on average, the monthly income in our sample was less than $1,000. Each interview lasted between 90 minutes and 4 hours. So these really resulted in kind of an extensive dialogue spanning numerous dimensions of the fathers' lives, including their childhood experiences, their romantic relationship history, employment history, their expenses and income, even their criminal background, and then going on to the current relationships that they had with their own children, with the mothers of their child or children, and then, of course, child support, which is what this study is mainly about. And most fathers were interviewed at least 2 times. So really, the data that we ended up with are extremely rich in terms of giving us kind of a comprehensive picture of what's really going on in these fathers' lives.
Sure, and typically studies regarding child support have taken a look at the the monetary contributions, whether they were made formally through the system or informally directly to the mother. This study differed because it looked at the contributions of non-cash goods or in-kind support, as you referred to it as. Can you give us a summary of the most significant findings from this study?
Sure. Yep. So as you mentioned, we focused on non-cash goods, which are termed in-kind support. And so these include items such as diapers and formula, clothes and shoes, gifts, small food treats that the father might buy for the child, school expenses, child care tuition expenses, and medical expenses. So that kind of gives you a sense of what we're talking about here. And what we found is that fathers in our study, despite having these very little financial means, as I mentioned earlier, they were actually contributing quite a bit of in-kind support to their non-custodial children. So for example, among children who received at least some in-kind support, each child received $60 per month on average in non-cash goods. And some fathers in our study had more than one non-custodial child. So this statistic is actually per child, which is a considerable amount. And by comparison, this was greater in value than cash support that was received by these same children through either formal support, which was $53 per month, and formal cash that was provided via the court system, and compared to about $40 per month that the children were receiving, meaning that cash that was given directly from the father to the mother. We found that the non-cash goods that were of highest value included clothes and shoes, which were about $19 per month on average, and then gifts, totaling an extra $13 per month on average. So I say, this in-kind support was non-trivial because the value of these non-cash contributions also constituted about 25% of the total amount of child support that the fathers were providing, including formal, informal, and in-kind support. Somewhat surprisingly, we also found that fathers who were the most disadvantaged, meaning those who did not hold a steady job or who were bringing in low earnings, and then Black fathers, relative to white fathers, seemed to rely more heavily on in-kind support than cash support. And these, perhaps, we believe, are some of the fathers that might be the most likely to be labeled as deadbeat dads. So overall, our findings as a whole were somewhat surprising, given that non-custodial fathers are not credited for these non-cash goods by the court system. And as you know, fathers can be jailed for not fulfilling any obligations that they might have to provide cash support through the courts.
Absolutely. And further analysis into the logic of the father's preference for providing this kind of in-kind support revealed that their motive was more relational than financial, meaning that by providing this in-kind support, it helps them to sort of build a bond with their children. Can you elaborate on that line of thinking and why these dads preferred to give that support even when it kind of risks increasing their chances of going to jail for missed child support payments?
Sure. And this, I think, perhaps was the most interesting aspect of our study. So what we found is that fathers were providing this in-kind support in order to maintain and secure a relationship with their child that could be sustained going into the future, even if the mother did not choose to facilitate ongoing involvement between the father and the child. And what we found is that these fathers were less concerned about necessarily paying their fair share of the expenses that the mother might incur for food or shelter or other household needs, and they were more concerned with the bond that their contributions could forge with their non-resident children. And given, the precarious economic situations of the men in our sample, like I mentioned, and other sources of instability in their lives, including economic instability, employment instability, other relational instability, it was really surprising and compelling that their primary concern there was really to provide for their children in a way that was repairing and bolstering and kind of securing the future of their connection to their child.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you also discuss sort of just why it's so critical to factor in all the different ways that fathers are able to contribute to their children's upbringing besides just a dollar amount?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think from there, our main perspective on that is, one of the central goals of child support policy is to reduce child poverty and its adverse effects. And so it's only logical that up until now, the court system and then most research studying that system has focused on cash contributions. But what our work is showing is that focusing on only these cash contributions might be short-sighted. And if fathers can successfully gain these improved relationships with their children through providing in-kind goods, then perhaps it is in the best interest of the child and the child's mother and perhaps even the state to credit these in-kind payments in some way, if that means that fathers will remain engaged over the longer course. And so kind of more broadly, our findings challenge this notion that the child support system should not count in non-cash for sources of support. And even further, continuing to ignore these contributions might be a lost opportunity to facilitate vital father-child bonds going into the future.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jennifer. We really enjoyed having you here on Dad's Divorce Live.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you.
To read more about Jennifer's study, make sure to visit DadsDivorce.com. That'll do it for another edition of Dad's Divorce Live. I'm Sean Garrison, editor of DadsDivorce.com. We'll see you next time.